Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk HR. And today we're going to take on the topic of sick leave. Now, when I used to work for a company way back when, there was an employee who would take tactical sick days and use them as holidays. So they would always be sick after a week's break or a long weekend, so that it might do a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then have Monday off. But I think a lot of people always suspect people to be taking sick leave when actually they're sick, and people just go, nah, they're not really sick, they're just having a day off, they feel like having a day off. And we're very untrusting in the UK, but we're going to have a bit of a dig into it today. Today I'm joined by Lee, Natalie and Vanessa. Lee, 2 times in a week, are you at home again?
I'm not. My home is not this fancy. I find myself in the beautiful city of Stoke-on-Trent in a hotel.
Natalie, you were running was it an event today?
Yesterday we ran an event, so we did a networking event on site, which was absolutely brilliant.
Ready for this? Ready for sick leave? Is this a normal problem for you with people complaining?
All the time. So either from clients or employees, it's a double-edged sword, this one, so it's going to be an interesting conversation.
And Vanessa, your first time joining us today. A little bit nervous, but we'll soon get into the rhythm of things, won't we?
We should be fine. Thanks for having me. Interesting conversation, I think, today as well. Big part of my life as an HR advisor, sick leave, so should be fun.
Yeah. And I'll stay with you, Vanessa, because the first part of this topic is companies expecting people to work from home when they're sick. There's suddenly become this element where companies expect people, if they call in sick, to just work from home as opposed to recover. Are you finding more and more that there's that pressure being put on people when they're calling sick to just work from home and, that way you're not sick?
Yeah, I've seen that over the past few years. I worked in different environments, and I worked from home during the pandemic and before that, and etc. And yeah, there's a lot of this expectation now, but I'm wondering if the expectation is from the employee themselves rather than the managers. I've seen that a lot with colleagues and even myself, to be, I feel a bit gross today, but I don't feel as bad, so I can still do a bit of work on my computer or whatever. But before that, pre-pandemic or whatever, we were like, okay, no, I'm home. I'm recovering home. I'm going to drink all the tea and honey in the world and going to feel better. So yeah, there's definitely a trend, but I don't know if the trend is, I don't know if it's pushed by manager or pushed by us, because we all live in this weird time where we're like, oh yeah, you have time, so you can, you're home, so you have to work, this kind of thing. Yeah. But I can definitely see.
I'm being paid, so I might as well do something.
Exactly. Yeah.
What do you think, Natalie? Do you think it's more the employer or do you think it's more the employee? And what percentage of wellness would you need to be to work from home, and what percentage of wellness would you need to go into an office?
Well, crikey, I always say that if you're not, we're all guilty of it. We've all done it ourselves and said, we'll drag ourselves into the office, just sometimes it's almost like a badge, and I've got to come in to prove I'm sick. And then it's up to the employer to gauge the level of sickness you are. It's almost like a comedy sketch when we think about it. But I think that's also part of our culture as well. We don't want to admit weakness in any way, but at the same time, we don't want to be seen as, being untrustworthy or dishonest in any way. So I think with the first part to what you asked is that I think it's 50-50 in some respects. There are some employers that I've worked with that have said, it's fine, just carry on and work from home. And it's almost like it's masking sickness. And the problem that we have from a HR perspective is that if ever we try to manage sickness, or if we try to try and address something, if we have genuine concerns, then the figures are really skewed, because the records will just kind of mask it. So it's very difficult for us to practically work with. So I always go on the theme of honesty is the best policy. Monitor and manage the sickness absence, because then you're being consistent as an employer. And the problem is that that's kind of being brushed under the carpet. And we often find that it's, oh, you know, I'm not very well, but I don't want to be, you know, not be paid. So can I take today as holiday, is the other masking that we see very commonly. But the two are very separate things. But percentage wise, I would definitely say it's down the middle for both of the questions, really.
And Lee, I mean, you work in the L&D side of things. So if you're sick, do you convert everything to an online class, or are you just like, well, it's cancelled, let's get it rebooked?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, if I'm off sick, then, you know, similar to what the two guys have just said there, I'm off sick. Fortunately, that hasn't happened to me. I've not been in that situation. But if I'm too unwell to run a classroom face to face in front of people, then I'm too unwell to run it, you know, via video link as well. And that's the choice that I've got to make. I have had it before in the business that I'm in at the moment, where we have had to cancel training for, you know, 30 odd people and the hotel costs that are associated with that. But if that person is unwell, we're not there to make that person feel guilty if they're genuinely unwell and they can't run that session. You know, if they are really unwell, they can't do it, and that's that. We've got to accept that.
Now, some people believe that sickness is like this big problem that organisations have. So I'm going to throw in a question for you all, and just throw a number at me. How many days sick do you think the average person has in a year in the UK?
I'm going three as an average, because I think there's a lot of people that wouldn't have any in a year, and then some that have quite a lot. So I'm going 3.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 4.
4.
I'm going to go out there and say like 12.
Vanessa's got it. 4.6 is the UK average. That's the number of days someone would normally take off sick, based on the ONS statistics from 2020. Which isn't that many, really. You might lose a week's worth of work per employee over the course of a year for people being off sick. And people treat it like this is major issue, don't they? And really, Vanessa, are we creating that issue by dragging ourselves in when we're coughing, spluttering, you know, throwing it everywhere in an air-conditioned office, just spewing it around the fans and making everyone sick? Where really, if we'd have just stayed at home for a couple of days and looked after ourselves, we'd be better for everybody.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I'd rather, for my people, I mean, if I was a manager, I'd rather, you know, lose like 2 or 3 days sickness for one person rather than having a virus going on, you know, especially as now we're coming back into the office. Some of us work in, I work in a healthcare sector, so I don't have a lot of people who actually work from home. They're all, you know, on site in a hospital and everything. So yeah, I'd rather have people just rest 2 or 3 days or a week, even just go get that flu away, rather than then losing more people weeks after weeks, because that thing circulates and then everybody just get the bugs and it's a nightmare.
Yeah, it's like making a statistical decision. Lose one person. If you, let's say you're a team of 10, you lose one person for a week, or do you downgrade everyone to, you know, 80% for a week because they've spread it around and everyone's coughing and spluttering and things like that? But sometimes, Natalie, trying to get people to understand that message higher up, to go, it's better to lose someone for a week than downgrade everybody in the office. People don't look at it like that. They look at stats on an Excel sheet, don't they? And how do you help people see that?
I think, again, a system, you know, people management, it's only as good as the data it holds. And if the quality of the data is low, you're not going to have a true reflection of what the impact actually is. So speaking as a business owner, I have been through this with many of my clients and do on a weekly basis. So we use various monitoring systems, and then we'll call the client and say, right, we've either got patterns of absence or we've got some concerns in this area. This is what we need to look at, and the support is needed for XYZ to resolve it or to support the employee. So it's a proactive way of looking at it. If you mask those figures, what you don't see initially is actually how much money the company is losing. I know that's not everything, but from my experience of when I've worked with board directors and gone into various board meetings, is that it's always about the bottom line. So if you have a true reflection of that and you're aware of where the pain points are, then you can put mechanisms in place to prevent it from happening or supporting issues in future. The main thing that we're seeing a lot of at the moment relates to sickness leave to do with mental health. And we're going to continue to see a huge rise in that. There's never going to be a decline in that. I think as more people become aware of it and how they feel and being open and transparent, I think that is going to be something that creeps in. Other things do get masked as well. So if you've got parents, working parents, and they say, well, I've had so many days off because of my child this year and whatnot, I have to call in sick. And then you've got the flip side of the coin where you have companies with enhanced sick pay schemes, which is the pain point I see all the time. And the issue with that is that then most of the time any sickness absence can be added on as holiday and taken as such, in that way. So I always advise people to stick to what the statutory requirements are, because otherwise it becomes very complicated. A lot of people say, oh, that's quite harsh. But at the same time, it's what's fair and consistent all round, because managers exercise discretion and then it leads to all these inconsistencies. We've seen grievances come out of this, on more than one occasion. So it's a very common thing, but it's striking the right balance for what works for everybody.
You hit a point, and I'm just gonna talk to anyone that's watching this. If you're doing a budget for sickness. The amount of budgets I've seen where people's not budgeted for sickness, and then suddenly, due to loss of staff and everything like that, they've gone, oh well, we've missed our time. Budget for it. Have it as a contingency. If you're ahead by half, release some money and invest it back into the business as to something you want to do, well-being, whatever you want to do, but have a budget line for it. If you don't have a budget line for it in your HR department, you're not planning for it, and therefore it's going to hit you negatively. So anyone watching, if you don't have one, ask for one, because that's really important. We're going to get to things like sick leave when it comes to children and dependents and stuff like that. That's why I will come on to that a little bit later, but that one really just connected with me in terms of the amount of people that I don't see that do it. Now, Lee, let's think about public sector for a second compared to private sector. Now, who do you think have more sick days? The people that are exposed to sick people all the time, or the people within the private sector who may not be exposed to sick people all the time? Strong immune system, weak immune system. Where are you going?
Well, I feel like you're going to prove me wrong with some data here, but I would have assumed that the people in the public sector, particularly the NHS, who are exposed to all different kinds of things all the time, they would have more sick days. But I suspect you're about to tell me I'm not right there.
No, you're right. It's 7.1, 7.5 days compared to 4.6. But I just wanted to see if I can make a second guess it. So, if you're sick, you shouldn't be bringing it into the office. Even though exposure does help reduce, obviously, improve your immune system, you still should be minimizing the exposure to people, especially with COVID and what's happened and the level of severity some people can expose from it. We're still seeing impacts of long COVID on people. So really, people need to be conscientious about how they manage themselves when they're sick, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think policy, both policy and company culture have got to support that, and they're equally as important to each other. The business that I work in, while we all know that we don't have to isolate anymore, there's no laws around isolation with COVID. The business that I work in is, absolutely zero tolerance on the fact that if you test positive or display symptoms, then you stay home, you don't come to work, you don't infect the whole workforce. I suspect there's quite a lot of businesses that, around the UK and around the world that adopt that same sort of policy, and that is actually written in our policy. But at the same time, it's company culture, similar to what Natalie was saying earlier. It's around, does someone have the psychological safety to call in sick? Do they feel repercussions if they're calling sick? Do they feel they're going to be judged? Or do they feel like the boss is going to say, yeah, no worries, is there anything you need me to do? To clear your calendar down for you, or whatever it might be, just so that the person can get some rest. Because like you said earlier, James, if someone can actually just have a nap all day, have was it the honey and lemon you said, Vanessa,
Yes.
and recover for the day, they're then ready for the next day rather than just dragging it out and having a bit of a half-assed attempt for the rest of the week, which is better for company culture, which is better for the morale of the entire workforce as well as the health.
I think you make a really interesting point about psychological safety, and I think it's the second time we've been on a stream where you've sort of brought it in at the right moment, because you think about most people in their jobs, they're all fighting to try and get that next promotion or to demonstrate or exposure to senior management and stuff like that. And everyone worries any negative thing is going to be seen as a weapon to be used against you, isn't it, Vanessa? So sometimes people make decisions to just get that ability to, be seen as someone that can go the extra mile and stuff like that. But sickness isn't the thing that you should be going the extra mile on, is it?
Absolutely not. And this is why this whole thing about psychological safety and education, it has to come from the top. And this is where sometimes I would kind of coach my managers or people at senior level to be more human. I mean, we call human resources for a reason, right? I mean, it's a very cliche thing to say, but it's true. We're not only, one number on a spreadsheet that put everything down when we're sick. We are people. And coaching these people and telling them they are strength in vulnerability, and, also allowing them to say like, oh, I don't feel very well, so I'm not going to do that meeting. That's going to go a long way from the people, from like individual contributors who are like, oh, hold on, if my CEO or my CFO, whoever, or that VP, that I look up to, actually say, I'm not doing this, I'm sick, don't contact me. I have a team that can handle things. Then they give themselves the what's the word? Thank you. That's the word. Sorry, losing the English is way too late for me. If I give them the approval to be like, oh, actually, I can be sick. It's okay. It's fine. I'm not going to lose that promotion because I'm not on 24/7. And then obviously it's like a bigger conversation about presenteeism and doing long hours and things like that. So yeah, I think it was a bit of a ramble here. Sorry, but it's more than being like policy enforcer. That's also a responsibility as HR and people to show that vulnerability as well.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think leaders need to demonstrate what they want their employees to do. Therefore, if a leader is sick, they should demonstrate that they've called in sick and not drag themselves in coughing, and making everyone else sick. Because if that's what the behavior they want to model, that's what everyone should try and follow. Now, what I'm going to talk about here is let's look at the rest of Europe. Now, in Sweden, which is seen as a more sort of progressive country when it comes to equality and rights and stuff like that, how many days sick a year do you think they take? 2?
I'm going with 2.
I'll go with 1.
Yeah, I think you might be right with 1. Yeah, it could be.
I was going with like 12 or 15.
I think they're quite a healthy nation as well, aren't they? I think they.
Well, yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
25.8 is their average.
Ooh.
Now, it begs a really interesting question, doesn't it, Natalie? Which is, have they embedded the culture of if someone in your family is sick or if you're sick, you don't come in, and you will do better for us by looking after yourself.
I think so. I know more about Denmark than what I do Sweden, purely because I absolutely love Denmark. For those that know me, know I'm obsessed with their ways of working, and I instill a lot of their practices in my day-to-day work. And I know that they have a very open culture about calling in sick, and it's like it's fine. I am genuinely unwell, so I'm not going to go in. So I can only assume that that's reflected over the border in Sweden. So what we're seeing there with those figures is a much truer reflection of what sickness absence looks like. Possibly, I don't know. I'll have to have a look at it, but it is one of those where I think actually at least employers are very aware. Again, they're a very progressive country and very economically stable too. So yeah, I can only imagine that it's due to having that open, honest transparency.
Yeah, and you talk about Sweden being economically stable. The worst in Europe is Greece with 2.2 days. They're obviously the opposite of economically stable. So Lee, are we starting to learn here that maybe treating people well, letting people recover, letting people function at their best is actually better for the performance of an organization or an economy or a country or any, however, whatever lens you want to put it through? Maybe allowing people to look after themselves is the right action.
Yeah, you would hope so. And also not just allowing them to look after themselves, but encouraging them to look after themselves with things like sick pay. As we alluded to earlier, particularly if people are on, low incomes or their financial situation isn't that great, they're not going to want to lose a day's pay. That's actually really impactful for them. That could be their disposable income for a week, that day's pay after all the bills have gone out and everything. So they're going to do everything they can to drag themselves in, even when they might be causing themselves further damage, or even, missing that doctor's appointment or pushing hospital checkups, things like that back. And, I don't want to make it morbid, but worst case scenario, the health gets worse. You don't want to think about worst case scenarios there. I think we actually need to encourage people that they can take time off for appointments so that they can get better and get healthy. As we said earlier, culturally, that needs to be encouraged, and there's no repercussions there as long as we believe it's genuine sickness, and that they're paid for it. I think that's really important. And what I've learned as I'm getting older, and we won't talk about that too much, is that, if I'm selecting a new job now, I'm not sort of like I used to be as a younger, more naive person, sort of begging anyone for a job kind of thing. I'd be quite selective. And not only is sick pay something that is very important to me when I'm looking at a new job, but also, does the company provide anything in the healthcare space? The company that I work for at the moment provides GP's appointments, and where I live, GP appointments, I think you wait about 8 years or something like that, because of the very poor state that the NHS is in because of its funding. So the fact that I can get a GP's appointment, I mean, one, I want to feel better sooner, but two, then it's not going to disrupt my work because I actually care about my work. Like I think 90% of the people out there do, they don't want illness to disrupt their work. So I can get a GP appointment same day or next day, usually on a video thing on my phone, and hopefully get sorted a little bit quicker, get whatever antibiotics, prescription or a referral or whatever I might need. And then the one step further, of course, is private healthcare, where again, you can get things sorted a little bit quicker. That preventative measure actually has an impact as well, as demonstrated by is it Vitality, that there are health insurance that actually encourage you to be healthier with things like the Apple Watch and stuff like that, because guess what, it reduces their costs in payouts if people are healthier, they live a healthier life. Other healthcare providers are available.
And I mean, you're right in terms of just I myself, I've had bad sickness for the last year or so. Getting a GP's appointment is a 10-minute window on an app. If you don't make it, you don't make it. Everyone's on a list and stuff like that. Whereas access to, fortunate, I was able to pay for private healthcare and support and stuff like that. I was able to get things fixed a lot sooner. But for a lot of people, especially in low-paying jobs, Vanessa, that's not readily available, and you can't take a day off to just go see the doctor. So especially the lowest, and in the US, it's saying that people with actual sick pay have the lowest long-term health issues. So do companies need to start thinking about, well, actually, how can we help our staff be healthier? How can we help them, just be healthier, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I can give the example of my company. As I said, I work in healthcare. I work for a group of private hospitals, and one of the benefits that we give from day one to everyone is private medical insurance, and anyone can apply to it, and that means maybe a lower paid workforce. That was a long sentence, sorry. But all hosts or housekeepers or ward staff, like all the lovely people who make hospitals what they are really, they have access to that from day one. And for some of them, for a lot of people, it makes a massive difference. Especially right now, with the strain on the NHS, and referral take weeks, if not months. If you have that private medical insurance, but also it's a fraction of a price. It's literally like less than a tenner, I think per month, and you have the whole pretty much the whole suite, and it's much easier for them as well to get seen, to get treated, and that's a relief, I think, for people. And also, I mean, I can talk for myself as well. When I joined this company, having used private medical insurance, that made my life so much easier because I could be seen a little bit quicker. And so this, I mean, I know not every company can maybe afford that, but having that available as part of your benefits offering can make all the difference as well, to attract people as well and retain them as well. So definitely. But yeah, I mean, everything that you can think of, Natalie, you were talking about mental health a little bit earlier, having ready access to an employee assistance program. That makes all the difference. They can be on an app or something. Training mental health first aiders in the company. That can make all the difference, to have this chat with someone who is also your colleague, but can signpost. They are not a replacement for a counselor, of course. And if you are in a crisis, they can signpost, and then a professional can take care of it after that. But having that makes all the difference to show that the company cares about you as an individual and cares about your well-being, cares about how you feel, and that small things that can be implemented, definitely. That's just a few examples. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense, and you're right in terms of sickness, whether it's mental or physical, just the ability to speak to somebody, knowing who you can speak to, just having someone to speak to makes all the difference. My brother-in-law has a weird habit of speaking to homeless people, so he'll give them like 20 quid and chat to them for an hour, and it makes him feel infinitely better because no one's judging him. It's a weird thing that he does when he's drunk. If he's got something on his mind, you always find him just sat there chatting to one. But one of the real problems, Natalie, is long-term sick, because that can cause a organisation and employee conflict at times, because if a company's not doing well, they see it as someone that they can just cut loose, but legally they can't necessarily do that, so they try and reduce benefits and support people. Finland and Austria have 6 months full paid long-term sick leave, which is a really good offering. I think that's the best in Europe. It's better than obviously the UK and the US. How should a HR professional deal with a long-term sick situation? Because you're managing both sides. You're managing the employee and making them feel comfortable, but you're also at times having to manage up because pressures on bottom lines and fact sheets and numbers, and if they've not budgeted for it, which they bloody should budget for it as well, but that's a different point. How do you manage that type of situation?
So again, it all comes into balance, and I've been in that position as a HR professional when I was in my corporate life, speaking to a director and trying to reason with them to say, look, this is a genuine case, and we were going through the motions of occupational health and all of that stuff. like your budgets, I always have a plan for long-term sick. So when I'm advising clients, there are what I call touch points during the course of that, because on one side, the employer needs to know exactly what's going on and the progress of that particular case. So communication is absolutely key. And if you don't communicate with the employee, they'll, you know, when it comes to phased return back or anything like that, it feels like they've been forgotten and they may not feel like they belong in the organization anymore. So we're seeing significant increases. So a lot of my client base are made up of care homes and hospitality, and on both of those areas the impacts are huge, but they also don't have significant amounts of funding. The care homes especially don't have that funding to be able to just get a temp in and things like that. So the remaining care staff then have to factor it in to be able to then try and to cover the workload. So it is a huge thing. Yes, everyone should get a budget in place. But have your pointers. So if you've got somebody who's going off long-term sick, you may not necessarily know that. They could go off with one thing and then be signed off long-term for something else. So the first thing is never to assume. But I always go on the 4-week rule. So as soon as that period of absence or continuous absence hits over 4 weeks, then that is classed to me as long-term sick. And that's at the point where you should be starting the motions of holding an attendance review meeting with them, referrals to occupational health. Some people say it's a bit too long in business terms. 4 weeks can be quite a long time. But generally, those types of organisations run very much on minimum wages and SSP. So for them, it's a bit different. If you've got somebody in the private sector, it's probably more obvious. And I say that because obviously it costs them more money if they've got company sick pay schemes in place. And that's a real bugbearer for especially those who are financially invested in the company. And if you've got somebody who is, you know, paid quite a lot for a job that they do, and then they're signed off for X amount of time, and say they had so one of the companies I worked with had a 50% for 3 months level of salary, which is incredibly generous for the UK. But what it did very quickly is that people just did start getting signed off. And I think there is this, I don't want to say that it's not genuine, because it's not up to us to question the validity of people's absences whatsoever. But what we are seeing is that people will be able to just get signed off by a doctor quite easily. And that's the issue. It's not the doctor's fault that that's happening, and it's not the employee's fault that that's happening, but various sick schemes have been taken advantage of in that way. It's not all the time that we see it, thankfully, but it is something that can be quite a bugbearer. So you can understand why the pressure comes from the top.
And it's sometimes there's little loopholes in there, like they come back for a day and then go back off again, and some of the process starts again. And if you've not got all the paperwork in place, and the other thing I see quite regularly is if people don't touch base correctly. I think you alluded to it a little bit, but if people don't touch base regularly, they're not keeping that communication. Vanessa, that can create a grievance case against it, and that extends the duration that they're off, even if they're well, because they're in a grievance and they don't feel like they've, as Lee mentioned earlier, the psychological safety to go back to the office, because they feel like the axeman's after them from the big tower above. So how do you deal with that situation where, you know, training a manager to actually keep in touch, check in, make sure they're all right? It's not a pointless task. It's a really important part of their job to do that regular check-in, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah. What do? I sit down with my managers when I have a long-term sickness. A little bit like Natalie, 4 weeks is my point where we need to think about occupational health referral. What are we going to do long-term? And sitting down with my manager and having a plan of action. So I encourage all of my managers to do weekly or bi-weekly check-in with the individual. With a consent, obviously. It could be a phone call, a welfare check. It could be an email. Usually I just say phone call and then follow up with an email. Also encourage them to do the absence review, obviously, every month, and also do an what I call an absence review letter, where we describe, on that date we caught up and we discuss X, Y, Z. On what date with this, on this date you've been referred to occupational health. This is the recommendation from occupational health, etc. Everything has to be documented, and to me that's the first thing to avoid, this kind of grievance or people not being sure what's happening. The second thing, I think, if we look a little bit ahead, is how do this long-term sick return to the company? So we talk a lot about phased return, but are they supported? Is there anyone doing check-in with them at the end of week 1, week 2, week 3? Can we look into, especially for people who've been sick for a long time, so maybe 4, 6 months, 8 months or more, when they come back, and the company might have changed a lot. So are we reboarding them? Do we do, an induction for them again? Are we looking at the job? Are they still comfortable doing that job? Other than the physical aspect of it, are they still psychologically able, to do that? Do they have the confidence to look at these skills? So we need to be with them like all the way. It's not just, okay, their return to work is great,
Sign,
my budget, it's a tick. My budget is done. My team is complete. It's great. We can smash our objectives and be productive and etc. Now you need to accompany them with us. So that's my work as well, to sensibilize, or to make my people manager aware that the work is not done the minute they come back.
And Lee, for someone like yourself, in that sort of learning, development, training, so many things have expired. And I'm not talking about the box training where, this is how you lift a box. But compliance, rules, regulations, everything that they've got to do within their workplace, all the paperwork they've got to fill in. So I guess for someone like yourself, it's almost like having a brand new employee, but a brand new employee that's cursed by knowledge of previous years. So it's almost a complete retraining when you get someone coming back.
Well, I mean, firstly, this is 2 calls this week where you've taken the mick out of manual handling training. So I think maybe we need to meet for some really good manual handling training, James. I don't know what boxes you're lifting and how you're lifting them.
With my leg. Always with my leg, not with my back. Straight with my leg, straight out.
Yeah, good. Box ticked. So I think my answer to that question is ask them. What does that person want? What do they feel comfortable with? My background is predominantly call centres, and I think every call centre I've ever worked in has always said, we're not really a call centre, we're a bit more than that. Every call centre is a bit more than a call centre. They all have their complexities, their nuances, and loads and loads of updates. So if someone's been off for, let's say, 6 months, then it's down to whether HR or just really good line management to ask that person, what do you feel comfortable with? Would you like to do a little bit of shadowing if that's possible in whatever kind of job it is, to learn? Would you like somebody to go through the updates that have happened, or would you just want to come back on an induction and do the full thing again? Because that's absolutely fine. There's some industries, I come from an airline background and that's how I got into call centers, but in airlines, if you're operating crew, then there's a very strict procedure there that you would need to go back through some sort of training or recency or top up or something like that. And it's very, very set there. And I think those industries where safety is an absolute concern, places like the NHS, places like airlines, places like the military, where safety is an absolute concern, they've got these kind of things right to a science. And so sometimes they're the ones to look at, how are they doing it? Because if they're doing it right and they're doing it a particular way, there's a reason for that, that they're doing it that way. So maybe we can all take a leaf out of those kind of industries. But yeah, the short answer is ask that person what they need. And in addition to what Vanessa said earlier about what they're comfortable with coming back, do they need somewhere to take their medication? somewhere private. I've had a situation before where someone was diagnosed with oh, my mind's gone blank. What's it called? Where you have insulin, diabetes. Yeah, diabetes, and they had to take insulin. Of course, they needed to have food ready and available. And, you know, we had a pretty decent canteen downstairs, but there was food in that line manager's little bread bin box. So that we had, you know, like your little drawers that you have. There was plenty of food kicking around just in case, because we didn't want somebody getting unwell on the floor in the call centre. We were ready just in case. And I think little things like that, again, although it's a bit of a joke, you know, it shows to the culture of the place that we will look after you and your safety is primarily important.
Definitely.
I remember
you can also...
Ed Gamble. Sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to go back on what Lee said about the safety and security and everything. One of the things that you can do as well, especially if you are in the healthcare sector, with, you know, where safety is very important, is actually do a risk assessment on the person's return, to have this written, you know, and have everything, the framework ready for this person to come back and to be safe for themselves and safe for others as well. Sorry, carry on.
Don't worry. All I was going to say is when he mentioned the diabetes thing, there's a comedian called Ed Gamble who is type 1 diabetes, and he makes the joke that he's a 40-year-old man, and no matter what coat he's got on, he's got jelly babies in, so he always feels slightly uneasy. Because that's what they suggest you have if you have a crash, to have jelly babies. So he's always got a bag of jelly babies with him, and he just feels a little bit wrong constantly. At what point do HR need to have a serious conversation with someone, Natalie, when they've been on long-term sick, or do they need to have a serious conversation with their line management with regards to it? Is it different in every case? Is there normally some sort of key indicators of a conversation needs to be having? At what sort of point would you say, do you know what, maybe we need to speak to this person about if they could or should come back to work or something like that?
Yeah, so I always say that obviously each reason for absence is different these days. So it does depend on the severity of the situation. We won't go into the realms of mental health as such, but you know, as well as I do, that the first people that someone will notice that something is fundamentally wrong is generally the workplace, because they're the people that you spend the most time with. And in my case, when I was unwell, it was my workplace that established that I wasn't very well. And you don't always see it when you're that person. And I had that conversation quite early on. When, you know, another example is I've been dealing with a case with an employee recently who sustained a severe back injury. And, you know, they really were very unwell. They actually couldn't move, which was really bad. And so they were very open and honest and said, look, I cannot physically move. So I said, at that point, we really do need to have that conversation. But I always say to people, look at it on a case by case basis. If you're, you know, especially if it's long term, because generally, you know your people best. And ultimately, if you've taken the time to get to know your people really well, then you would know actually something isn't quite right here. So you do have to trust your gut. One thing that I would always say is that it's just those touch points are really important, because if we're trying to make contact too often, it could be seen as harassment. If we're contacting too little, it can be seen as, oh, you know, they don't care about me, or they've forgotten. So it's, again, everything that we do is with a balance upon, you know, we're not there to harass or antagonize people in any way, but what we want to do is demonstrate the duty of care to those people. So by doing that, I would always say case by case basis every time. You know your people best. If not, speak to someone like a line manager who is close to that person and works with them every day, because then you can get a real feel, especially if you're in a large scale operation like a call center, for example, and you've got different shift patterns and things like that. It's not always easy to know all of your people, but you know that somebody in the organization will.
Great point. And just to finish off, I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios, and you just got to tell me, yes, I'd go in the office. No, I wouldn't, and maybe that for work from home. Okay. Sprained wrist. Would you go in the office, work from home, or take it off? Work from home. Oh, interesting. You see, I'd go to work. I'd go and work. Go to the office in case you needed additional equipment and stuff like that, because you might have it there.
What if you can't drive to the office though?
Very interesting point. I tend to drive more. Yeah.
Yeah, that was mine because I thought I probably can't drive.
Yeah.
And my job is like 50% driving.
A sore throat. Would you go in the office, work from home?
Yeah, I would.
Depends how bad it was. I mean, if it was really bad, I wouldn't go. But
there's no cough. It's just a sore throat.
Oh yeah, go in. Okay. I mean, I'd do a test. You know, if let's lay a COVID on top of it, I'd do a test.
Yes, same.
COVID symptoms. Go, everyone, and take it off. Rightly so. You just don't want it to get any worse. You don't want to end up with long COVID or anything like that. A twisted ankle, your left ankle, and you're driving automatically. I don't know if you do, but just in this hypothetical situation.
I've never twisted an ankle because I predominantly just sit down, so I don't know what I don't do sports or anything like that or movement, so I don't know what it's like to twist an ankle. I don't know how bad it is.
You've got the cobbled streets of York.
I have.
You could be on Lehman Gate and just go over. You know, you're having a nice time. Oof, twisted my ankle. Did you go in the office?
Yeah.
Okay, and the last one is you got an eye infection. You can see perfectly fine, but it just affects how you look. Would you go in the office? Would you work from home? Or would you call in sick?
Reluctantly, I'd go in the office.
Yeah, same. I mean, either way,
if you could get away with it, work from home.
I'd work from home because purely because eye infections can be quite contagious, and if you're rubbing your eye and then going into the canteen or the kitchen to make yourself a cup of tea and you're touching everything, then you don't know if someone's going to come along, grab a spoon and then rub their eye. I don't know, or touch a tea towel, because they always say not to do that. That's my mum coming at me, sorry.
Okay, so there you go, there you have it. No matter what's wrong with you, it definitely falls into one of those 5 questions that we've asked, and you can decide whether or not to go in the office. But what we've said here is sick leave is what we need to be doing more of, is just being open and honest in regards to if we can work, if we can't work. And if you do feel sick, don't just sit on your laptop on your sofa at home and try and do as much work as possible. Get yourself back to 100%, and you'll be surprised how much you can quickly catch up on the work that you missed out on. This has been Let's Talk HR. This has been Sick Leave. Thank you very much to Lee, Natalie, and Vanessa for joining us today, and we will catch you on the next one. Take care.